Hello, good evening, everyone.
Hello, teacher.
Okay, so today we will try to finish our chapter, and we will have the group presentation today. Uh, so the presentation will be by Davin, Dane, Sunita, and Konita. Okay. Okay, I think we have 17 people. I think we can start now. Last week we talked about the series, the classic series about the economic growth, and we know that there are four big group, right? The linear state, uh, linear state of growth theory, which give importance to the capital, okay, capitals, and it said that capital is the key for having economic growth. So you need to mobilize the capital, okay, that support the economic growth. You have to put your capital in the right economic sector. Okay. And the second group of theory we call the structural change, or the pattern of structural change. So this group referring to structure, okay, structure and reform, okay, that must be exist in order for economic to have, for a country to have economic development. Lastly, we have a radical theory, which we say that economic growth and development depending on external force, especially the foreign countries, the international organization that influence the way the country can have economic growth. And lastly, we have the free market theory, which focusing on market plus the role of governments. Okay, role of governments. So the combinations of the market in allocating the resource, okay, and the intervention of the government important for having economic growth. So we're almost done with this all of series. So let's visit. So today I want to talk about the two big growth theory, and I think I should not actually discuss in very technical, but let's have a view of what it means. So when talking about economic growth, we do have two big theory. The first part we call the exogenous, okay, exogenous, called exogenous growth theory. I think you learn in the I think mathematical, right? In mathematical economic, right? In the year one, right? I don't know it. So you know what exogenous variable and what is endogenous variable, right? It sounds a very technical word, okay? So in economic, when we talk about the exogenous, if variable is defined to be exogenous, it means that variable is, in English word, we call it given, okay, givens. We call it given. Given, it means that the value of the variable is cannot be explained, okay? It's something like we taking it as granted. We don't actually think that will be something that can influence it, okay? So that is called exogenous. So some kind of quantity that is distinctly, okay, decided by the government can be considered like exogenous. Exogenous. If there's nothing that can explain it. So the exogenous growth theory is a theory in which that the element, one of the element in explaining economic growth is keep unexplained. It means that we take it as given, and we don't know what influence it. Okay, so one of these exogenous growth theory is the one that is invented by Robert Solow. So Robert Solow win the Nobel Prize, and he actually invented a model which we call a Solow growth model, and it's depending on the production functions. So according to Solow, the GDP, okay, the total productions in the economy, or the gross domestic product, okay, the functions of many of three of the key variable. One is the capital, okay, capital, and the other one is labor, and we have a factor which we call A. So people call A like it's referring to technology, okay? So A is called technology. So this is the idea of Solow. So we say that there are three key factors which can influence the GDP, okay, which is the capital, labor, and technologies. Okay, and this function can be taking any mathematical form. The very simple mathematical expression is the one is called Coulomb-Douglas, okay, Coulomb-Douglas, and in which the variable are joined with multiplications, okay, and come with it exponential powers, okay. So you can write any form, but the very well-known and popular form is called the Coulomb-Douglas form. So in this, actually, all the variables are multiplied with one another, okay, and so according to Solow, there are three key factors: the capital, the labor, and the technology, okay. So some people think of this A like the this model is called technology embedded, okay, embedded technology with labors, okay. So sometimes this A is called the labor product, we call productivity of labor, because it augmented labor augmented model, okay. You may say, well, sir, why don't we put this augmented into capital? Well, that's possible. There could be capital augmented technology, or it could be the labor augmented technology, or it could be the technology that is separated from the capital and labors. That would be fine. So it's up to you according to, but there are three key ingredients: the capital, the labor, and the technologies, okay? The alpha here is equaling the elasticity of output with respect to capital. You can think of this like the contributions of capital to the GDP, okay, to the GDP. So according to Solow, three factors contribute to the output growth or the GDP growth. One is labor quantity, which is the L in the functions, okay, and the other one is the labor quality. Because you can think of like A is like the improving in knowledge of worker and so on, and the capital, okay, which is the coming from saving investment, and lastly is improving technology, okay. The Solow growth model acknowledge diminishing return, okay, unlike the Harrod-Domar model. In other words, in Harrod-Domar model, if you look at the let me visit that again. So this is the Harrod-Domar model, right? So you see that the growth will depending on the saving and the capital, okay? So the more saving you have, the more capital output ratio, okay, the better the smaller value of C, the more you can grow. So there's no limitation for growth. You can have growth forever, okay? So you have unbounded growth according to the Harrod-Domar model. However, in Solow model, Solow still accept the importance of capital, just like in the Harrod-Domar model. So saving and investment is still important. However, unlike in the Harrod-Domar model, Solow actually acknowledge the diminishing return of the capital. So he's saying that he knows that capital is important, but he also admit that the capital will get old, capital will get depreciated, the machine will get old, okay? And when it get old, it means that the contributions of the extra hour with the machines will start to decline, and that we call diminishing return. Okay, so that is the idea of the difference between the Solow model and the Harodoma model. Both give importance to the capital. However, in the Solow model, capital suffer from the diminishing return because the machine is getting old. Okay, and so because of this, Solow actually say that the capital will result in the conversion toward a steady state. In other words, if you have a country that depending on the capital to grow, let's say Singapore, who received a lot of FDI in the last 30 years before they graduate from the low-income country to be the high-income countries. So they receive a lot of capital. Okay, so capital play an important role in helping the Singapore to have economic growth in the last 30 years. However, when the machine getting old, then Singapore growth will start to fall, to decline. And for sure, GDP growth in Singapore is actually getting slower. It actually start to, it does not mean that Singapore don't have economic growth. They do have, but it's just that the growth rate is starting to slow down and to reach the steady state, which we call the long. I will explain the steady state in the next slide, which is a very technical term. Okay. So according to Solow, the free flow of capital from rich country and open economy would play an important role because you depending on capital to grow. And Solow assumed that the population grows at a constant rate, which we call the rate we call N. Like in Cambodia, our population growth is about 1.2% annually per year. And this lambda is called the technology growth rate. Okay, or you can call productivity growth rate. Okay, so according to Solow, he admit that the capital, the labor and technology is important, but he did not explain the what actually make this technology grow, what can push. Why do some countries have better technology than others? Why do some countries have very advanced in technology in R&D, research and development, for example, than the other countries? Okay, R&D, for example. So Solow did not explain that, and this A, the A that you see in the production function is left unexplained. That's why, and this A is called Solow residual. Okay, we call residual. The word residual means that it's something that being left unexplained after we take account of the labor and capital. Okay, so something that left after the labor and capital is the remain, and the remain is called residual. And Solow did not explain what is the residual. You know that it's technology, but you don't know if that what makes the technology stronger or more modern or actually out of that. Okay, what explain that? So we call Solow model the exogenous. Okay, exogenous growth model. The other model in which they try to explain this this technology is called endogenous growth model. Okay, endogenous growth model are model that you try to explain what can make technology better in one country than others. And one of the model that try to admit that is the Roma. Okay, Roma model, Paul Roma. I think Roma actually win the Nobel Prize, I think 2 years ago. Okay, he talked about the, I think he win the Nobel Prize with the Thomas Surgeon, maybe. I think he talked about the recursive by trying to solve the dynamic process of labor market, okay, to work the set. So anyway, the main idea of the endogenous growth model is that technology can be explained. And according to Roma, the educations can be used to explain why some countries have better technology than others, because they have better human capital, they have better educations. So that's why so Roma tried to explain the technology by using the human capital. Okay, that's the difference between the exogenous and endogenous. So in the model of the endogenous growth model, R&D is being explained. Okay, what can make this R&D better than others? Maybe government interventions or externality of this R&D and the private-public partnership in R&D and so on. Okay, so they try to explain the fact what can make technology better. Okay, so that is called endogenous growth model. And this one is the explanation for the steady state. Okay, steady state. So steady state, what is it? A steady state is the a situation in which the growth rate for the capital, okay, is zero. It means, in other words, we can say that there will no more, okay, no more growth in the capital when the machine actually getting old. Okay, so you can see first when your machine is still new, okay, so it will have, so here I have the output, okay, I put on the vertical axis, okay, and I put the capital here, okay, and then I have this one is the production function. So production function is that for every capital output, small k is the capital output. I mean the uh, capital per labor. It means that the small k is equaling to the big K divided by the labors. Okay, it's all capital per labor. So you can see that as more capital is adding, more productions that you can achieve. Okay. However, when you reach the K star, okay, you can see that the level of the output that contribute by the new capital start to remain constant. Okay. So in other words, just like you reach the diminishing point. Okay. From about that, when you're adding more capital, it means it seems like it does not contribute to any more output. It does not mean output decline. Okay. It just means that the contribution for output actually did not lead to extra output. Okay, did not lead to extra output. And when that reach the point, we call that the steady state. Okay, generally some of the developing country would be here. So you can see the contribution of the capital is still high. Okay, and sooner when they reach the K star, you can see it mean that it mean that the output, okay, start to stay there. Okay, it is not fall, it's not increasing more, but it's increasing slower and slower. So if we work out with a little bit mathematical derivation, which I'm not go to in that, we can see that the change, okay, the growth rate of the capital, you can see this is the investment that put in, according to the this is the saving, okay, or you can see the new money, the new capital that you put in. And this one is the, you can think of the machine. So this one is depreciation. Machine is getting old, okay? And this one is the growth rate of the labors, okay? So in solo, it means that labor and capital, you have to use it combined. You have to combine it together. If you have, if the population grow, okay, and the capital actually remain the same, then the output, I mean the capital per labor, would decline. It means that you have too much labor that handle with the machines, okay? And that will also leading to the decline in the contributions of the labor to the output, okay? So the growth rate of the capital depending on the how much saving that the country have, but it's also offset with the depreciation. It means that machine getting old, the machine getting old, the capital is depreciating. And also it's offset with the increasing population growth. Okay. So this actually, so when these offset each other, okay, so you can see that this, so the saving rate here is fixed, okay, but the FK here is the contribution, the output that contribute by the capital. You put more capital and then output start to grow. Okay, but however, when you reach the K star here, then you can see as the output actually getting little and little and until it reach a constant level. Okay, the constant level. At that constant level, then the the two things would just offset each other. Okay, so the saving that you put, saving that you used to buy the machines, and it just equaling to the rate that machine is getting old. Okay, so then you no longer have the growth rate in the capital. Okay, so the growth rate of capital will reach the steady state. So K star is called steady state. Okay, steady state. So when an economy reach the steady state, it means that the you no longer have growth in the capital per worker will actually no longer growth. Okay, no longer having growth rate. Its growth rate will be zero. This does not mean to say that economic don't have growth rate. Okay, it just say that the contribution from the capital actually reaching the point of the same growth. For example, if you found that Europe this year they have growth 1%, next year 1%, the other year 1%, 1%, 1%, the last 5 years, it means that they reach the steady state. Okay, so that's what we mean by the steady state. So at the point of K star, which is a steady state, the labor, okay, the will grow at the rate of this constant rate. Okay, and the capital will grow at this rate. Okay, and Y will grow at this constant rate. Okay, so in other words, when you reach the steady state, your GDP will grow at the rate of technology growth rate lambda plus the growth rate of labor. Okay, so you have the economic growth, but your economic growth is defined by the the growth rate of the population and the growth rate of technology, and the growth rate of your capital is zero. I mean the small k, growth rate of small k is zero. Okay, so you have economic growth, but your economy is keep growing by depending on population growth rate and also the technology growth rate. So I say again, a steady state does not mean economy have zero GDP growth rate. Okay, so please don't confuse that. It just means that economy reach a point where they having the constant growth rate, and the constant growth rate is driven by the growth rate of technology and the growth rate of the labor. Remember, in the original we said there are three elements, right? The capital, the labor, and the technology. So when you reach the steady state, your economic growth rate would only influenced by the technology and labor. Okay, because capital would contribute no more. Why? Because the machine is getting old. Okay, unless you have new machine. Okay, unless you have new machine. So that is the idea of the solo growth model. So I don't want to go in very detail for that because it's highly advanced. Okay, so I like to only touch on that. So this is a case where you have a new, you have a new saving. So this is your original saving. So with the original saving, let's say you have 16 million populations, and adding all the saving in the country plus government saving, then the steady state would be at K star. Okay, if our economy is still somewhere at here, okay, that's fine. We can have economic growth unless we reach the K star. Okay, if we have some, we start from somewhere, okay, like the Europe, okay, we already have high economic growth, then the contribution from the capital will start to grow but slower, and then one day we reach this steady state. Okay, so mobilizing all the saving, you will be here. Let's say you have a new saving which is coming from China, okay, or from the FBI. Okay, in that case you can have a new saving which is here. Okay, and you have a higher level of the steady state which is K star. Okay, so you can grow until you reach K star prime, which is higher than the old steady state. Okay, so according to this idea, it means that if your economy depending on capital for having economic growth, then you need to receive more and more capital, more and more saving. Okay, if you don't have any more saving, one day you will reach a steady state, unless you have the new steady state. Okay, I mean you have you have to mobilize saving all the time. Okay. Otherwise, the contribution from the capital is just only temporary. Because one day when your machine getting old, you will get this, you will arrive at a steady state. Okay. So if that's really true according to the solo growth model, what is the key important for the technology? You can see in this in his here, it was the technology, okay? The technology A and the labor. That would be the important element for growth in advanced country. That's true, okay? In Europe, you need to contribute a lot, okay, by investigating and focusing on the technologies. So in Europe, they put a lot of value on R&D, research and development. Okay, so they come up with new innovation, they invent AIs, okay, and something like that. Okay, when Europe actually start to have the population growth rate slow down, you can see that their economy also start to slow down. So heavily they're depending on R&D and new technology, okay, digital transformation and so on. So I hope you get the ideas of the solo growth model, and I like to pause here and welcome your questions.
Teacher,
Yes.
could you explain the exo and endogenous model again, teacher? It was confusing between the two.
Well, exogenous, the difference is that exogenous model did not explain what influenced the technology. Okay. What influence technology, we don't explain. So in other words, this lambda, which is the growth rate of technology, is not explained. What can make the technology better? Okay, that's called exogenous. When we don't explain the technology, we just accept, okay, that technology is key for economic growth. Okay, and that's all. We call that the exogenous growth model. Okay, when you try to explain, okay, first you accept that technology is important, but you go beyond that and you try to explain what make technology improve, what make a better technologies. That is called endogenous growth model. Jermaine, I don't know if I properly
Yes,
highlighted.
teacher.
Okay. So in solo
Teacher.
model, he just say that technology contribute to growth. Okay. But he did not explain what can make the technology in one country better than the others. Okay. So there's no explanation. So that's why we call solo model is exogenous model. In Roma model, the education, okay, the human capital is used to explain that what can make technology in one country better than the others. Okay, so a Roma model is called the endogenous growth model. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, so as I say, it's mostly if we observe in the real world. So you may say, do we really have the steady state or not? Okay, we can observe that some of the high-income countries, like in Europe, in the US, in Japan, you see that their economic, the growth rate, I'm talking about growth rate, okay? The growth rate is actually only around 1 or 2%, okay, per year. The GDP growth rate 1 or 2%, right? Between this range. And it had been there for, I think, 10 years, 20 years still there. You rarely see that they have a growth rate of 10% or 7%, 8%. Okay. So more likely, it's quite true that some of these advanced countries are experiencing the, I think, the diminishing return. Okay, because they already exhaust the resource they have in the countries. I mean, their people are getting old, and then all of the way that they can contribute to having higher GDP, higher production, higher improved productivity, all the people have educated, okay? All of them graduate at least finish bachelor degree, okay, in all those countries. So they have already exhausted all the way for economic growth. So that's quite true that they can have. So even I want to say that even they grow at 1%, does not mean that the GDP is smaller than our country, okay? Because their GDP is already much bigger. Like in the US, their GDP is almost 10 times or 50 times or 60 times bigger than Cambodia, okay? So they have bigger GDP, okay? Bigger total income. But the problem is that their growth rate from one year to the next year is smaller. In Cambodia, you can have a growth rate of 5%, 6%, or 7%, okay? We call the emerging market economy, which you have very high growth rate. But still, our GDP is much smaller than the GDP in the US or GDP in Japan, okay? It's so different, okay? So I think it's quietly true in the solo growth model that capital do experience this kind of diminishing return, okay? That's so in those countries like Japan, in South Korea, or even in the US, okay? The key important for driving the economic growth right now is to look for the technology. So R&D, okay, research and development, the innovations are they playing important role in the. They even don't have population. I think, as I told you in Japan, okay, you are experiencing aging society. Okay, you have people get married late and they even don't have enough labor. They have to bring labor from Cambodia, Vietnam, and Philippines, okay, to work in their countries because the population growth rate is decreasing. This one is going down, okay. So they only depending on this, okay. So that's the key, and they have to bring new labor. Singapore have to depending on the labor from I think many of the Indian and rice. When some of our skilled worker from Cambodia who already work in Singapore, okay. So they depending on those labor from the other countries. Okay. So technology play an important role in those countries. In Cambodia, we do depend on this, but we don't reach the steady state yet. Okay, maybe we're somewhere here. So our since we are our capital is below the steady state capital. Okay, then we can have the contribution more. Our machine is still young. Okay, we haven't exhausted our resource. Okay, we still have more young worker. They don't have actually having skill yet. They are on the way of training. Okay, so in the next 10 years or 50 years, we don't know. We will be at the steady state. Okay, so this steady state is not that. You can think like solo is like it's telling us about the trap. Okay, okay, a trap. Maybe you can imagine of the middle income trap like that Thailand is experiencing. Okay, there is a steady state. Okay. So it does not mean we cannot escape. We just need to look to the technology, okay? Improving and explaining what contribute for the technology innovations and digital transformation, digital economy, okay? That's the way to escape this trap, okay? I think that's maybe what I want to say. Any question for that? Davin?
No, teacher, clear.
Okay. And Nita, Simsonita, right? Simsonita, not here. Supposed to be a presenter today. And Kanita, everything okay?
Yes, teacher.
Okay. So I think I don't want to go this beyond it. It's quite a little bit complicated. Okay. But the simple sense is that the idea is that to have economic growth, you cannot depending on capital alone, according to the solo growth model. Okay, because the capital will experiencing the diminishing return and it will reach the steady state in which that at that level of capital growth rate, your GDP will grow at a constant rate, and it cannot be stuck in there. Okay, so you need to turn on the technology and the to support your economic growth. Okay, in the long run. I like to conclude the chapter. Okay, so first, I think that after we learned all of the theory, we already actually, as I said, we have four big popular theory, classic theory. It has called classic because they are very old. Okay, very old ideas. Okay, that's not mean that it does not work and it's no longer useful. It's still useful, but it had been invented and proposed it long ago. Okay, in the past. So we call it classics. So this four group of theory actually highlight somehow about the role of the market and also the government. Okay, we learn in all of these, we can see that the government do fail sometime. Okay, for example, we learned that in Russia, in Soviet Union, okay, which is exercising the planned economy, where government decide everything, okay, was not actually success. In China, the same thing. During the Mao Zedong, okay, you can see that China you suffer a lot. Okay, it's only after Deng Xiaoping that come to power that everything actually improve. Okay, so depending, government can fail sometime, and the fact that they can fail because you can see that government are not profit oriented. Okay, so they don't have tendency to improve efficiency. They still care about the inequality. They will actually more think about the stability, something like that. Okay, so and also because they are not profit oriented, sometimes they tend to be influenced by interest group. Okay, like in the public choice theory, right, where all the regulations are set up under the influence of a small interest group. Okay, so because of this, some people believe that some economists think some economists believe that government sometimes can fail. Okay, can fail. That's because they may have the bureaucracy. Okay, bureaucracy, or because they have the corruption, for example, that may be actually leading us as obstacle for improving the efficiency. But we also learn that market also can fail. Sometimes private sector can actually fail. Okay. For example, we see oil crisis in some countries. I think last few days, right? In, in Sri Lanka, okay, they have a situation where the supply of electricity is not enough. People need electricity, and because the hydroelectric irrigation, dam is not working. Because there's no rainfall. Okay, so they are in the shortage of the supply of electricity, and government require to people to experience the electricity cut off. Okay, so that is the evidence of the market failure. So market did not provide the enough quantity that is need by what the people and the consumer need. Okay, so sometimes market leading into too much productions, excessive production, but sometimes it's also leading to too little. Okay, production, like in the case of electricity shortage in Sri Lanka. This is the case of the market failure. Okay, we see this. There are many reasons that can lead to the market failure. Okay, such as the externality. Right, externality. Externality, as we learn, is the case where the actions of one people create a cost or benefit for other people, and the person who create this externality, they do not actually pay for that. Okay, or being paid. Okay, enough to compensate for the externality, and that would leading to too much production or too little productions. Okay, environmental pollution can be an example of the market failure. Okay, and the other reason is like the public good. Okay, public goods. Some of the good which have a public natures require the government to produce it. Okay, so if we allow the private sector or the market to do it, you will see that you will have market inefficiency. Okay, think of the public education. Okay, if we only have private education, you will see that many students, I mean, poor people want to have education, then they may not be able to go to school because private school require you to pay. Okay, so this very little production of education will be supply in the market if everything is done by market. Okay, so public good actually require a government to produce it. Seaport, airport, bridge, okay, satellites, weather forecast stations, okay, public hospital, okay, Olympic stadiums, okay, Tonle Sap, river management. All of these require the government to the one who have to do it. Okay, because these are all we call public good. Okay, I think you learn the political economy, right? You know what public good is. Okay. So public good are required by government. Generally, it was the government that's suitable to produce public good or public service. The other that market can fail is called asymmetric information. Asymmetric information happens when the buyer and the seller don't actually have the same information. This happens many cases in the labor market. When you apply for a working job at the, let's say the Australian embassy, okay? The problem is that the Australian embassy actually don't know what is you're really good at the skill that the embassy is needed. Okay, so they have little information about you than you yourself. Okay, so the Australian embassy is the buyer. They buy your labor, and you sell your labor, right? But the problem is that the buyer, the Australian embassy, have little information than you. Okay, so you know better than them. You know what you can do. Okay. So in that case, you try to signal, okay? You signal to the buyer that I'm very good candidate. I have my degree in international relations. I graduated from IFL, at DIS, okay? And this is ability, I can speak 3 languages and so on, okay? So that is you try to signal, you're signaling, okay? Provide information so that the buyer can have more information. And from the buyer side, they try to screening. They screen you, okay? They check your qualification, they check your certificate, they check your CV, and they may ask you to have an interview, okay? Or doing the apprenticeship, okay? For some, I mean, probation period, okay? To see how good you are. This is because they don't have the same information like you have, okay? So signaling and screening become the key when we have asymmetric information, okay, happening. Because otherwise, market will resulting in that you cannot get a job that you want to work, okay? Or you may have to work in an occupation that is not a skill that you have, the skill mismatch, okay? So this is the case of market failures. Another example we can see in the insurance market, okay, insurance market. In insurance market, generally the company that sell insurance, like the Manulife or Prudential, they don't have much information about the people who buy the insurance. Okay, insurance. The person who buy insurance know better than the insurance company. So there is asymmetric information. For example, in the insurance on car, for example, Infinity. Okay, I think people who buy insurance sometimes are the one who drive carelessly because they know they have insurance. They tend to behave in a way that's careless, leading to more traffic accidents, and then they claim for the insurance. So in this case, we call moral hazard. Okay, moral hazard, because we call adverse selections. Adverse selection is that the insurance turn to select only the person who very easy to have causing the accident. Okay, then this is leading by because of the asymmetric informations. So how could we solve this problem? We have to improve informations to make sure that the company and the people who subscribe for the insurance do have the same informations. Otherwise, you will suffer this kind of the asymmetric information. In agriculture, we do the same thing. We have experience. Farmers sometimes don't have better information about the price of the agricultural product they have to sell. Okay, so by the end of the day, they overproduce or they underproduce of the agricultural product that they are doing. Okay, so this is an indication of market failures. Okay, many. Yeah. So you need to balance. If you the government, you need to know, okay, in what area that government can do best, okay, and in what area that government cannot do, okay. So you need to balance with that, okay. Sometimes government do better than the private market, okay. Sometimes market can do better. You don't need government intervention, and the balancing is the strategic for government. Government who succeeds, okay, government, the smart government know, okay, how to balance with it. Just like Singapore, okay. You know, Singapore actually, you can, if you look at Singapore, it's more like government intervene too much, okay. Sometimes we feel like that, okay. They do a lot of things, okay. Even to support the firm, okay. Even to recruit the labor for the firm, okay. So sometimes they intervene too much, okay. So if you think of Singapore, that's in country that you have too much government intervention. I can think like that. What about our country? I think we still more like having depend too much on market. Okay. We may, if I have a line like this, okay, have a line like this, and this one is 0% of government intervention, this one is 100%. So I can say country in Russia maybe somewhere here, okay, Russia, okay. But I think US, I don't think US is here. I think US is still maybe you still have 20% government intervention. Okay, and I think Singapore is somewhere here, maybe 70% are government interventions, and 30% are free market. Okay. What about Cambodia? I think it maybe 50% or could be 40% at government interventions. The rest are market, something like that. Okay, so we really have a 100% free market or a 0% free market. Okay, in today's world, you don't have that. Okay, the other thing we learn from all the theory that we learn is that you have to pay attention to the institutions and political issues. You know, institution referring not to the organization, referring to law, regulations, the custom, the norms. Okay, all of this actually, or behavior. Okay, this can actually have impact on the way that the efficiency can happen in the countries. Okay, so this is very important. If you have a policy, you want to do something, you have to know whether that fit with the institution or not, because sometimes it may be not good. Okay, so for example, you say you want to promote the you have a law in Islamic like Iraq. Okay, you want women to have more actually gender equality. Why in the tradition of Islamic religions, it's very difficult to do that. Okay, so you try to impose that kind of law and that maybe not succeed. Okay, so you need to admit all of this if institution impact on the way the economic can grow. Okay, I like to say one example when I think of this is about the, you know, during the Chumban festival. Okay, people like to go to pagoda and they throw rice. Okay, we call boss by bun. Okay, and so this is what our culture say. Okay, you want to give offering to the ancestor. That's what you do. Okay, so this is we think of our norm, but this is our culture. This is relations. It influence this institution. It affect the way people behave. And lead people to behave by throwing this right. But of course, you are wasting your resource, right? Is it wrong? No, it's not wrong, but it wastes the resource. So such kind of culture and custom relation can affect efficiency of how you use resource. Okay, and you don't know it. Okay, it's because you're living in that custom, in that culture, in that relations. It's affect the way you behave. Okay, so you need to know about that. When you design any kind of policy or you want to encourage any kind of policy. Development economics have no universally accept paradigm. In other words, There's no theory that work all the time. Okay, it have its own weakness and it have its strength. Okay, insight and understanding continue evolving. Okay, maybe we will have new theories soon. Theory have some strength and weakness. So these are all the things I want to say about the 4 big theory that we learned so far. Okay. So I think that's all for what I said for this session. So would you have any question? Okay, if not, I think we can have a break, and when we come back, we can have a break for 10 minutes. We come back, we'll listen to our group presenter. Today we will have Davin, Kanita, and Rita, right? Sharing the presentation. So let's have a break for 10 minutes. So now it's 6:30, so we come back at 6:45, okay? And we listen to our presenter. So let's have a break.